The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast.
We're excited to have Deandre Ayton on board. The Lakers get their center, not unexpected. Once Deandre Ayton was bought out, he was linked most closely to the Lakers the entire time. Wednesday afternoon, he does clear waivers. That part's definitely not surprising. And it is the Lakers who emerge with him under contract 2 years, $16.6 million. The remaining part of their non-taxpayer mid-level, the bigger contract they were able to get once DFS, Dorian Finney-Smith, went to Houston. So Jake LaRavia got part of that money. Deandre Ayton gets the rest of it. So is he a good fit? We'll talk about it in a moment. Do want to let you know before that, though, that Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So, not unexpected, but at least in my mind, Andy, still a pretty BFD for the Lakers to land Deandre Ayton for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, this was huge in terms of the Lakers looking to find a center through free agency. We've talked about this before. They were very limited in terms of their resources to do really anything, much less find a center through free agency. They were dealing purely with exceptions, vet minimums, that sort of thing. And it felt like until Deandre Ayton became a very surprise candidate through this buyout with the Blazers, that if the Lakers were going to find a definitively starting caliber center for this season, it was going to have to be through trade, because the options were so few for the Lakers to begin with guys who you could even just plausibly talk yourself into as a starter, much less the guys that you know are at that caliber. Deandre Ayton has had his detractors, whether you're talking about media, whether you're talking about the teams that have employed him. I think it is safe to say that he has not lived up to the billing and the hype since getting drafted number 1 overall, ironically, ahead of new teammate Luka Doncic. But it doesn't change the fact that he is definitely a starting caliber center in the league. And whatever questions exist about motor, true desire, true passion for basketball, when you are putting up 14 and 10 with 3 of those rebounds on the offensive glass, a block a game, and some of the other numbers we'll get into, you clearly are doing something productive, because you don't just fall into that stuff.
I think, look, there's a lot to this conversation that I think, quite frankly, many of the people kind of in the chattering class who are talking about, basketball, social media, and even some people who kind of do this professionally they're getting this wrong. And how they're getting it wrong is I'm supposed to believe Deandre Ayton turns the Lakers into favorites. I'm supposed to believe that Deandre Ayton makes them, instant contenders. So something like, that suddenly he's going to become this consistent all-star player and this and that, whatever. And the answer to that is no, you are not supposed to believe these things. You don't compare Ayton to the idealized version of the center you would love for the Lakers to have acquired. You compare Ayton to the players that they had available to them, and then you have to compare it to, let's say, like, what if I stipulate this, Andy? DeAndre Ayton fixes none of the issues that have dogged him throughout his career. Doesn't get that much more professional. Still is a little bit disappointing. Still has moments where he completely checks out and just is a frustrating player. That guy is still light years better than Jackson Hayes.
Yeah.
Who was the only center the Lakers really, at least, and he wasn't even on the roster, but
No.
theoretically.
No, the only center on the roster right now that is definitively on the team for next year is Trey Jemison III on a two-way deal. And you and I have been actually, I was talking earlier with Nick Angstadt from Locked On Mavs, Locked On NBA, the channel manager for the entire network of NBA shows here at Locked On. And he did note, and you and I have been derelict in this, Maxi Kleber is on the roster.
I always forget.
No, we have, because when
no, it's 100%. Always forget, but he's okay. Fine. Ayton is light years better than Maxi Kleber too.
Sure, and Kleber is arguably as much of a 4 as a 5 or whatever. I'm just saying my whole point is we've been forgetting to mention him among the centers who won't cut it. Right. That's my point.
There's a reason you forget it. Deandre Ayton is one of these guys for whom the pendulum has swung too far the other way, where people look at him and say, "Oh, this guy's trash." He has never, disappointing his career may be, and for some people in a lot of ways, he's never averaged fewer than 10 rebounds. He has been a reliable 14 to 18 point scorer every year of his career. He put up, depending on, whose metrics you believe and this and that, whatever, put up some pretty good numbers in Portland on a disorganized team, particularly in the first part of that year. Ayton is far better than anybody the Lakers could have had access to before that buyout, realistically had access to. And the Lakers are getting him at a cost, $8 million for this year with the player option that Ayton, I'm sure, hopes he won't exercise because he'll have outplayed that contract for next year. That is less money than San Antonio is paying yearly for Luke Cornett. It's less than the Clippers are paying Brook Lopez to be their backup. And this is critical. The Lakers didn't send anything out to get him. So they don't have extra roster spots to fill now because they made a trade that opened up holes that they now have to fill. They have those contracts that they can use to try to maybe swing another trade, or you come into the season with those players on your roster. But, somebody asked me earlier today on Twitter at Cam Brothers, it's a great comment, Mr. TD. Ayton has absolutely found money. But somebody asked me, is he better than Mark Williams? I think so. But, whether you disagree, you might think Mark Williams is a little better than Deandre Ayton. I don't.
If nothing else, you can believe in the upside of Mark Williams more, if for no other reason than Mark Williams. The main reason I think he's been considered a disappointment is purely because he hasn't been able to stay on the court. Whereas Deandre Ayton has been around longer, disappointing people. At the very least, you can believe in an upside of Mark Williams more than, fair or not, I think people will believe in an upside for Deandre Ayton.
Sure, but Ayton, you could also argue Ayton's disappointing production is still better than Williams's. But what I can guarantee you that Ayton is he is definitely better than Williams, plus connect and a first rounder and a swap. Ayton is definitely more valuable than all of those things put together, because that's really, you got to factor in what the Lakers were giving up there. So, I think the point of this exercise is that I do think there is tremendous upside, and we'll talk about the fit in the next segment, but the Lakers stopped the bleeding here. Have they had as good of an offseason as Houston or Denver? They have not, and it would have been almost impossible for them to do it. But what they've done is they still have Luka Doncic, they still have LeBron James, they still have Austin Reeves. They picked up a nice piece in Jake LaRavia, and now they have filled in pretty good fashion the biggest gaping hole on the roster, and that gives them a chance.
Well, you mentioned that, people asking you, does DeAndre Ayton, I can't believe Laker fans are trying to talk themselves into DeAndre Ayton making them a contender. And DeAndre Ayton makes them better, like for all the reasons we talked about definitionally, because they didn't have someone of his caliber before, short of another trade as unexpected as what happened with Luka. Ultimately, if the Lakers become a contender this season, it's because we're going to see the most actualized version of what Luka, LeBron, and Austin can do together. Like
Yeah,
that's ultimately going.
But I think
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm a part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started.
The New York Knicks have their next head coach. They're expected to hire Mike Brown.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast.
Mike Brown, according to Ian Begley and Chams Charania, is expected to be hired as the Knicks head coach in quick succession. We're going to give you our rapid reaction on that. What is the overlap with Tom Thibodeau? Is there a concerning amount of overlap with Tom Thibodeau in terms of strengths and weaknesses, and what exactly new Mike Brown will bring to the table versus Tibbs? What does this say about the front office? Can they hire some top assistants? And what are our expectations year one? So we're going to get into all that in just a sec. But first, I want to remind everyone that today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Alex Wolf, let's just start with a temperature check. What is your gut feeling about the New York Knicks hiring Mike Brown?
I mean, I've been kind of like accepting of this for the last few days. This kind of seemed like the direction they were going to ultimately go. I look, if you asked me and I wasn't the one interviewing the coaches, I was probably more of a Taylor Jenkins guy, but ultimately, like, I think Brown's resume is good. I think that he did really well for himself in Sacramento. There are some questions, obviously, like some of the things that Sacramento fans were unhappy with him about are the same things that Knicks fans were unhappy with Tibbs about, in terms of like burying younger players that the fan base generally thought like has been good and the numbers supported them, like Keon Ellis. I know Kings fans weren't super happy with that, but ultimately, I mean, with the hand he was dealt, he created a pretty good defense there. They ran, I think, more creative offense than what the Knicks ran. He certainly did a really good job of utilizing a versatile big man in Sabonis on offense, which he'll get, barring any trades or anything happening, he'll get Karl Anthony Towns, who's a versatile offensive big man to work with on the Knicks. So that's a plus. Sort of a similar situation, like star player wise, although they have different skill sets, obviously, but he's coming from a team with a star point guard, star center with some defensive issues, to a team with a star point guard, star center, both with some defensive issues of their own, but a really good defensive team otherwise, in terms of like the personnel that he's handed with all the wings that the Knicks have and everything else. So, I feel pretty good about it. I mean, I think that he's, some people might look at it and be like, well, how is this any better than having Tibbs, considering he's also like kind of a retread, kind of an older coach, whatever, older sensibilities, been head coach since, on and off since the mid 2000s. So it's like, has he learned enough about the modern game and whatever? I would say that based off what he was able to do with Sacramento, I think that speaks pretty well for him. But the question will be, is he a next level coach, or is he just a culture setter, kind of like what Tibbs was? You got to hope it's the next level coach, because that's what the Knicks are hiring for. But that's just kind of my thoughts. I mean, I'm willing to give them benefit of the doubt. They interviewed him. They were very thorough with, I think, this interview process. And, we'll talk about it a little later in the show, but a lot of this, I think, is going to come down to, are they going to handpick a bench for him, like handpick his assistant coaches, his top assistants, to, help things along and bring some really smart minds in here. So it's kind of more of a group think than just like installing Mike Brown and being like, figure it out yourself. I think that'll be key. But as of right now, my inclination is I feel all right with it. I don't know. How are you feeling about it?
Now I'm in a very similar place. I think cautiously optimistic would be the right way to describe it. The Keon Ellis point, and you noted this the last episode we did, the over reliance on their starting lineup at the beginning of the year. There are just so many echoes of what the Knicks went through this year, right? They have De'Aaron Fox, obviously, is going to be out there. They have DeMar DeRozan. They just paid Malik Monk like big money on extension. Obviously, Domantas Sabonis was going to be out there. Keegan Murray was their top 5 pick from 3 years ago. And on paper, those were your 5 best and your 5 most important players. So you were going to play them together, and yet the numbers screamed they were not very good with those 5 guys on the court. And they were really good when you plugged in Keon Ellis, specifically because he didn't need the basketball, because he had off-ball gravity, because he was a playmaker defensively. And I look back at all that, and I go to Deuce McBride, and the parallels just kind of scream in my mind of, like, I'll steal Benji Ritholtz's term when he was talking about this, like an analytics darling who was like kind of unfairly benched because he wasn't the bigger name. And I wonder if Mike Brown learned from that. My real question here is, like, was that actually the concern of the Knicks front office when they fired Tom Thibodeau? Was it, hey, like, we have all this lineup data that screamed we're really good with 5 shooters out on the floor, and that's how we maximize Karl Anthony Towns, this piece we gave up everything to get? Or did the Knicks front office mostly agree with how Tom Thibodeau deployed talent, and it was just that Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby were coming to them and saying, hey, we don't really want to play for this dude anymore? And Karl Anthony Towns was saying, I despised how I was used. In which case, there's a world where Mike Brown is Tom Thibodeau with a fresh coat of paint. I don't really think that, though, because he, to your point, was just a lot more set-based than Tom Thibodeau was. And this is something that Shaq's highlighted in the really good breakdown he wrote of Mike Brown, where he was very happy to orient the offense around their talent. And if they had movement shooters, it was, all right, let's run action for them off the ball, which is not something Tom Thibodeau consistently did for Dante DiVincenzo or for Quentin Grimes or now for Deuce McBride. And I do think there's going to be more of a focus on, here's what I have offensively and defensively. How can I adjust it? There's like another point that Benji made. Like, he used Domantas Sabonis at the level, and he used him aggressively, acknowledging, like, hey, this guy is a fantastic 5 offensively. I have to do some weird creative things to maximize him defensively. I do think there is a stubbornness with Mike Brown, but I think his baseline inclinations are a little bit better than Tom Thibodeau's. And that's really encouraging to me, beyond the fact that he's clearly a guy they were comfortable with from a media point of view, from a expectations point of view, from a pressure point of view, a guy who's won multiple I think 3 or 4 championships in his NBA career, someone who's been coach of the year before, like has been in those stages, has felt that pressure and has handled it pretty well. I think, to your point on Taylor Jenkins, I tend to agree with you. I don't know if that was as much of a priority for me, but I also haven't been in that situation. I haven't been in those press conferences. So maybe I'm underestimating it. And maybe that is a key thing in Mike Brown's favor. That was something that Tom Thibodeau was very good at, both to your point as a culture setter and someone who could, I guess, just handle like the context he was in New York. And they felt like some of the younger coaches they interviewed weren't quite ready for that stage.
Yeah, maybe on that point too. I mean, considering his age and coaching age, I guess I should say, like, his actual age doesn't really matter, but the amount of time that he spent on NBA teams, the fact that he kind of had to like go through the process of the sort of humbling of being, a head coach, getting ousted in Cleveland, and then coming back as an assistant with the Warriors, working in that capacity for a while, then goes to the Lakers. That was short-lived. Just didn't seem like a great fit ultimately, but then ending up with the Kings and kind of growing as a coach there. Seems like he's been in a variety of different locker rooms. And I think we saw pretty quickly when the exit interviews happened, and then like a day later, Tibbs got fired, that there was clearly a little more going on in the locker room than we thought this year. And maybe some guys that were unhappy with Tibbs's ability to communicate things effectively, to the point where certain guys started kind of saying stuff to the media that was enough to raise our eyebrows, at least. So maybe that's a part of it too. I mean, I do think that there's something to be said for like a lot of NBA coaching is managing personalities and, ensuring that people all feel like they're valued on the court and that they're all being utilized right and utilized in the ways that they want. And so from that perspective, I kind of get this hire too. Like, he is someone who's been around the block a number of times. He's been on some really high profile championship teams, like when he was an assistant with the Warriors. I think there's something to that as well. And that was probably something that they brought up, being like, hey, these were some of the things that Mikal Bridges said to us, that OG Anunoby said to us, that Karl Anthony Towns said to us, and maybe even Josh Hart, for all we know. I doubt Brunson said anything because he seems so even keel. But, these are things that guys were saying to us in exit interviews, like, this is how our players want to be utilized, that we're going to be riding with this year. Like, we would like to win a championship with them, and it's going to take them all being on the same page. Do you think you can handle that part of the job? And I get the feeling that was probably, for a front office that is so relationships based, with Leon and Worldwide West and all that, that was probably a pretty big point of the interview process. And that probably won Brown some favor with the Knicks front office. So I think that's probably something we should sort of keep an eye on, and might be something that, whenever he does his intro press conference or MSG network interview or whatever ends up happening to introduce Mike Brown as coach, that'll be something I'll definitely be listening for in terms of how he hopes to manage the personalities and kind of lead this team in that way going forward.
Yeah, and I think, look, I kind of phrased it and maybe quickly dismissed it as like, that shouldn't be the sole reason to hire a head coach. It should be a priority. Like, you built an infrastructure and a culture in which Jalen Brunson was willing to take 70% of what he's worth to give this team flexibility to go and win a championship. And it is something we talked about in light of Tom Thibodeau being fired, that there was a lot of good done under Tom Thibodeau. Like, I think player development was probably the greatest one of those. I'd have to go back and look at Mike Brown's track record to get a gauge of that. He's mostly coached very veteran-laden teams, so that's something to watch, with 4 rookies coming back from last year, some of which we think could potentially break into the rotation. I mean, on paper, none of those guys are going to play right away, but with injuries and stuff, you don't know, and you hope that continues. But in terms of just having everyone move the right direction, I do think that will be a strength of Mike Brown. And I know when we had Matt George, again, the host of Locked On Kings, on, that was something he really emphasized, and the fact that, like, De'Aaron Fox, despite like rumors to the contrary, had a level of loyalty that when Mike Brown was fired, he essentially said, like, all right, I'm done. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. You guys aren't serious about winning. And he took a Sacramento team that was in a very similar place as the Knicks were when Tom Thibodeau came in, and led them to their best season in 16 years. Like, that's not nothing. And it is a credit to him from an X's and O's perspective, but it is also a credit that, like, some of those same strengths that Tom Thibodeau had, he will maintain. And if you brought in a coach that hit marks from, again, like an X's and O's standpoint and a lineup optimization standpoint, and was like interested and willing to engage with the NBA's largest analytics department, those are all great. But if you lose what Tom Thibodeau did exceptionally well, it might not have ultimately mattered. So I do think all that stuff is significant and exciting.
Clayton Kershaw hits another career milestone, 3,000 strikeouts.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Clayton Kershaw, strikeout number 3,000. We had a really good idea that today was going to be the day that it all went down. Of course, he had the big day in Colorado about a week or so ago, and leaving himself 3 short going into this game with the White Sox, and it felt inevitable. Well, he made us all wait on the edge of our seats for quite some time. We got there, but it took some time, right? It was a 6-inning performance from Clayton Kershaw. He picked up strikeout number 3,000 with the very last pitch he threw of the night, his 100th pitch of the night. And quite frankly, not a vintage Kershaw performance by any means. It was a bit of a slog along the way. The Dodgers end up winning in the bottom of the 9th inning. We'll get to that a little bit later on in the pod. But all in all, just a wonderful night for one of the great Dodger pitchers of all time. And let's just kind of peel the onion on all of the things that happened for him tonight, because it really was a remarkable night. So 3,000 strikeouts. If you are an everydayer, you know this number by now because I've said it for the last several weeks. 3,000 strikeouts is an extraordinary number. It is a number that is more rare than winning 300 games. 300 games has happened 24 times. Clayton Kershaw tonight became just the 20th pitcher ever to rack up 3,000 strikeouts. And while the number 20 in the history of baseball is an incredibly small number, It actually is even more exclusive than that when you think about what Clayton Kershaw was able to do tonight. Just the fourth left-hander to rack up 3,000 strikeouts. Think about that. The 4 left-handed pitchers have struck out 3,000 pitchers in their careers. Clayton Kershaw becoming number 4. The others, Steve Carlton, Randy Johnson, of course, the greatest left-hander of all time, and CC Sabathia also in that group as well. So Clayton Kershaw in some elite company. Of course, you're talking about the best of the best. Clayton Kershaw will join Randy Johnson and Steve Carlton in the Hall of Fame. CC Sabathia, by the time that Kershaw is eligible, will be in there as well. So a very, very select group. The number actually gets even smaller when you go down to this number, 3,000 strikeouts with one team. It is just 3 names long. Now, Clayton Kershaw is number 3 there. The other 2, Walter Johnson, believe it or not, didn't see it with my own 2 eyes. Walter Johnson back a million trillion years ago. And Bob Gibson, of course, the legendary right-hander for the St. Louis Cardinals. So Kershaw, of course, each and every one of those 3,000 strikeouts has come in a Los Angeles Dodger uniform. And it's just another one of those lines in an extraordinary career that just kind of informs how good he has been. Here are some no numbers. If you've listened to me since I've taken over the Locked On Dodger pod, I like my baseball numbers. I think it's pretty hard to be a baseball fan and not like them, but I am not devoted to them. I also believe my lion eyes. I also believe in watching the games and what it feels like and what it looks like. But I also think that sometimes the numbers will tell a pretty compelling story. And here are some numbers about Clayton Kershaw since 2008. This is not just a good pitcher. This is a great pitcher. This is one of the greats of all time. This may be the greatest Dodger pitcher of all time. I'm sure there are some generational components to all of this, that if you are somebody a little bit older than me, maybe you are a Koufax person, maybe you are a Don Drysdale person. If you are my age, I will argue for Fernando Valenzuela and Oral Hershiser. Those were the great pitchers of my childhood. And now, of course, you've got Clayton Kershaw doing what he's doing. But how about this? Since 2008, Clayton Kershaw of pitchers that qualify, 2.51 ERA. Among the pitchers that qualify, where's that rank? Number 1. His whip, walks, hits, innings pitched, 1.01. Where does that rank? Number 1. His batting average against in this time since 2008, 207. Where does that rank? Number 1. His fielding independent of pitching, 2.85. Number 1. His home runs per 9 inning, 0.75. Number 1. His FWAR, 77. Number 1. 3 Cy Young awards, 1 MVP award. On and on and on and on. Just another one of those lines in a resume that's going to feel like something out of a comic book once he is finally done and getting ready to be inducted into Cooperstown. It's a great moment, and taking nothing away from the moment, but it was an unusual way that you got there. 14 2-strike counts in the night. Only 3 Ks. He needed 3 coming in. He got exactly 3, but he had 14 guys on the precipice. And of those 14 guys, only got the 3 Ks. So that means 11 guys were able to fight off that strikeout somewhere along the way, put the ball in play, get a base hit or whatever it may have been. He did not have great stuff tonight. This was not a holy smoke, look at what this guy is doing sort of night. This was I don't know if he's going to get it tonight. I don't know if he's going to be able to close the show. Are we going to have to? Is this going to happen on the road? Is this going to happen after the All-Star break? Are they going to send him back out there for that 6th inning? Because at the end of the 5th inning, he was scuffling a little bit. You could tell that the nerves that came along with him tonight were real. You could tell that even a guy that had been around the block a million times and pitched in World Series, in All-Star games, and playoff games, and like I just mentioned, won MVP and Cy Young over and over again. There haven't been too many situations on a baseball field where Clayton Kershaw has not taken the ball. And you could tell he was pumped up. He was spiking pitches. When he got to 2 strikes, he was missing the zone by a lot. It wasn't like, the umpire was squeezing him or anything. These were no-brainer balls. These were, 58-foot curveballs. These were fastballs that missed the zone by, 6, 8, 10 inches sometimes. They were not close. And even a guy as experienced and as skilled and as accomplished as Clayton Kershaw was not able to find his groove and just put guys away. We're going to get to that coming up in the second segment, because there are some things there that tonight is probably not the night to talk about them, because everything is positive and wonderful. But there were some, this is what we have been seeing. And while the good stuff is happening, if you're paying close attention, some other stuff was happening as well. But it was an absolute delight to see him get it. It was an absolute delight for a chance to see him do it in front of his family, in front of his wife. I thought that was a wonderful moment, that after he got strikeout number 3,000, he waved to his family. They waved back to him. You could tell it was an emotional moment for all parties involved, and anybody that has kids or a significant other or any of these things, that stuff hits in a way that it is very hard not to put a smile on your face. So congratulations to him and his family in doing what it was. I thought that the Dodger fans put a ton of pressure on him for nothing other than they wanted to see him do it. But you're talking top of the first inning, you get a 2-strike count. Everybody's on their feet. Everybody's waiting for it. And that's a whole lot of pressure. There's a whole lot of weird stuff happening for a July 2nd game when you got a 1,000,000-game lead in your division against one of the worst teams in baseball, and everybody's hanging on every pitch. That was different. It was exciting. It was fun. It was interesting to see, but you could tell that he was really kind of leaning on it. And then when it ultimately did happen, an extended standing ovation, a curtain call where he ultimately comes back out of the dugout, seeing him go into the dugout and hug his teammates and his manager and his pitching coach and the Dodger staffers that were in the dugout. You can just tell the impact that he has had, not just on the city and on Dodger fans, but on the people that actually know him, the people that have competed with him and against him and alongside him. Just a really meaningful moment like that as well. There was enormous pressure on this. It's a very weird situation, like I mentioned, where this game really didn't mean anything other than it was Clayton Kershaw's opportunity to strike out 3,000 guys. But you could feel the little extra something that's in the air or whatever that is. It was certainly palpable through those early innings, and you could tell that he was feeling it. He was not sharp. He could not get that knockout punch on a lot of these guys. The 3,000 strikeout, of course, comes looking on a ball that was clearly a strike, and I'm glad it wasn't one of those borderline pitches. It caught a lot of the strike zone, fooled the hitter. But just a really cool moment for Clayton Kershaw, a really cool moment for any Dodger fans out there, and something that I'm sure we will talk about for a while. And for all the reasons that I mentioned towards the top of the segment, it is an incredibly small group of people that have struck out 3,000. It is an even smaller group of people that are left-handed that have struck out 3,000, and an even smaller group than that of people that have struck out 3,000 batters for just one team. So congratulations to Clayton Kershaw for everything that he got done tonight.
Ever check your bank account and wonder where'd all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
LSU lands a 5-star edge for the class of 2026.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's start with the gigantic news. Trenton Henderson 5-star edge out of Pensacola has picked LSU. 24/7 rates him as a 5-star, the number 28 overall prospect in America. He's the 4th best edge rusher in America, according to 24/7. Now, in the On3 composite, so that's combining On3, 24/7, ESPN rivals, combine all of them. And he is the number 59 overall player in the country. So no matter how you slice it, this is a top 60 overall player in the composite, number 28 overall, regardless of position, by 24/7. So a truly elite edge rusher, 6'4", 225 pounds. And my goodness, not only is this a guy who is a top flight prospect that everybody wanted. In his announcement, which was streamed live by 24/7, he had LSU, Florida, and Texas hats on the table. But man, he had offers from everybody. LSU, Auburn, Florida, Michigan, Texas, Florida State, Southern Cal, Bama, Miami, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Georgia, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Ole Miss, you get the point, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Illinois, Washington, Kansas, Wisconsin, you get it by now. Had offers from everybody. Pick of the litter, go where you want. He picked LSU, and a gigantic hat tip to Kevin Peoples. Kevin Peoples was the primary recruiter here, and remember, Kevin Peoples was brought in from Missouri as the edge rusher coach, the outside linebacker edge rusher coach, where Blake Baker had coached with him at Missouri. They brought Blake Baker comes in. They bring in Kevin Peoples. They also bring in Jake Olson to coach safeties. So Blake Baker knew what he had. By the way, Kevin Peoples, also a guy who comes kind of from that Pete Jenkins tree, has a great lineage there. Coach Pete has been on this show in the past, the godfather of all defensive line coaches, and has raved about Kevin Peoples and not only his ability technically as someone who can coach the defensive line, the edge rushers, but also clearly as a recruiter. So you get a 5-star edge rusher and a guy that everybody wanted. And now when you start to look at this class for LSU, that checks a major box because LSU, as of right now, with the addition of Trenton Henderson, now has 12 commitments. And Henderson is the 3rd highest rated commit in the class. Tristan Keys, the 5-star receiver, is the highest rated, the number 1 receiver in the country, number 5 overall prospect. Richard Anderson, the number 1 defensive line prospect in America, the number 26 prospect in the country, and then there's Trenton Henderson. So your 3rd highest ranked prospect in the class of the 12 commits you have, but maybe more importantly, he is the first edge rusher in the class of 2026. Certainly won't be the last, but here's why this is so significant. Remember how LSU built this roster in 2025. They went into the portal. They knew they needed help at edge rusher, and they went and added 3 veteran edge players. Jack Pyburn from Florida, Jabari Butler from Nebraska, Patrick Payton from Florida State. That's fantastic. And when we were out there in spring practice and they ran the 2 deep, they ran in tandems. You saw Jack Pyburn and Gabe Relaford, and you saw Patrick Payton and Jamari Butler. Those were the tandems that ran. Of those 4 I just mentioned, 3 are transfers that are gone after this year, which means when you go into 2026 and Henderson is a 5-star member of the class of 2026, you're losing 3 of your top 4 guys. Now, when you just look at numbers beyond there, you're losing Payton, Butler, Pyburn. You will have in 2026 Relaford back for his 3rd season, his true junior season. Also remember, Kalaj Cobbins came in a year ago with Relaford, as did C.J. Jackson out of Tucker High School in Atlanta, Georgia, 6'4", 240. So you're going to lose those veterans. Your 3rd-year players are going to be Relaford, Cobbins, and Jackson. Also remember, you've got Dylan Carpenter, who is a year older than those guys. Carpenter's entering his third season in Baton Rouge this year in 2025. Those four. That's it. You do have Damian Shanklin, and Shanklin was one of the top edge rushers in this class, so coming in as a true freshman. So the four that I mentioned, 3 entering their third year, 1 Dylan Carpenter earning his fourth year, and then you've got who I just mentioned there, and Damian Shanklin. Notice a trend there? You don't have any experience outside of Gabe Relevant. So the edge rusher spot is going to be wide open in 2026. So if a guy like Trenton Henderson as a 5-star comes in, he's going to look around, and the only guy with meaningful playing time that's going to be on the roster is Gabe Relevant for 2026. So there is a real chance, this isn't just, oh, he's a 5-star, he's going to come in and be great. There's a real chance for him to come in and contribute immediately, maybe not as an every down player. And yes, LSU is likely going to go into the portal in 26 and add some veteran pieces in the portal at defensive end because you're going to have to. You're not going to go into the season with only Gabe Relaford or Gabe Relaford being your only experienced edge rusher. But the point is, this is a guy who comes in with massive credentials that kind of rivals what we saw in 2018 when you brought in Caleb Von Chasson. Now, Chasson came, or 2017. When Chasson came in as a 5-star edge, that was a guy who you knew right away could get on the field. And he did. And then 18, of course, had the unfortunate ACL. In 2019, had a great season, became a first-round draft pick. All that to say, when you kind of look back through the years, and I was asked this question on Wednesday morning, when the last time LSU had a really great defensive line. In the 2 years I came up with, although, hat tip to 2019 when LSU won the national championship, but realistically, you had Rashard Lawrence and Braden Fehoko, who Lawrence was a very good player. Fehoko was a very nice player as well, became an NFLer. You had Apuaika as well as a rotational piece on the interior in that 3-4. Chasson became a first-rounder. Michael Divinity was another end on that team, if you remember. But outside of Chasson, you didn't have the real high-end NFL elite talent. You'd have to go back to 2016 or even 2011. In 2016, you had Arden Key in his All-America season. You had a Lewis Neal, who was a great edge rusher that season. You had interior players like Devon Gottschall, who went on to be a really good NFL player. Really, if you go back to 2011, that's when you had Logan Brockers on the interior, Mingo Montgomery on the end. Like, that was the last really great one. And maybe you're starting to rebuild that again with the way you're recruiting. Obviously, Richard Anderson, 5-star, number 1 defensive lineman in the country coming in 26. Henderson, 5-star, one of the top edge rushers in the country in 2026. Maybe you're getting back to that with the focus on the defensive line, because you had certainly strayed from there for a while. And Trenton Henderson now, look, I get it also. There are cynics out there that are going to say, don't care about commitments. Talk to me when they sign on the dotted line and they show up on campus. And I don't blame you if you're cynical. I don't blame you. But I'll always say I'd rather have the commitment than not have the commitment. And we're talking about a 5-star edge rusher, which is one of the best players in the country, at a great position of need, with an opportunity to make an immediate impact when he gets here in 2026. I'll take that commitment every day of the week. It should be celebrated. Great job by Kevin Peoples, by Blake Baker, Brian Kelly, this whole staff to land Trenton Henderson out of the panhandle of Florida there in Pensacola. He's committed to LSU now for the class of 2026.
Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. I've been using FanDuel to track my favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, fast to pay out, and makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. Whether I'm placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet ride into the 9th inning, FanDuel makes it feel like I'm a part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm super thrilled. One of my Alex City comrades has just committed to the University of Alabama. We don't get a lot of those Alex City dudes committing. We had one years ago when El Toro Freeman committed to Auburn, or ended up at Auburn, and I can't remember the linebacker's name. I don't think he ever made it to school. I mean, he ended up having to go to junior college, and I don't think he ever actually came to Alabama. So, and then there was the Bolt kid who committed to Bama many years ago, like in the 80s. But other than that, it's been sort of slim pickings for Alex City kids. But this kid, hey, this is the one I wanted more than any of them, Jimmy, and I'm going to give you the floor for a second.
Yeah, CD Morgan is one of the best wide receivers in the country at 6'4". And you know, some kids list themselves at 6'4". This is a legitimate 6'4" framed kid. He's thick, weighs approximately 220 pounds. There are tight end prospects his size, but make no mistake, this is a wide receiver. He's got the quick twitch. He's got hips. He's got flexibility. He's a natural route runner. His hands are fantastic. Certainly a little bit on the bigger side. You know, we said on the show this morning that a good comp for him is Julio Jones. Now, keep in mind, we're not saying he's Julio and is going to have Julio's career, but he's like Julio in the sense he's built like Julio. He has a play style similar to Julio Jones. Julio is his idol. Some of this is by design. He wants to play like Julio. And Alabama fans should know what that looks like. We're not saying he's going to have Julio's career. That's not fair to CD. It's not fair to Julio either, because you're talking about one of the great careers in the history of wide receivers. But what is CD Morgan's upside? How good can he be? I mean, you know, you're probably in Julio ballpark. So, boy, very excited. Huge day for Kalen DeBoer. And shout out to Coach Shepard, Jamarcus Shepard, who I think just did a lot of the work here.
We want to give a shout out to Cole's son, Rawson. He said, we watch you guys every day. Appreciate you watching, Rawson. You sound like a great American. Happy 4th of July to you. Yeah, this is look, Jimmy and I called it. I called Jimmy about a week ago, plus or minus, and I think we were all pretty confident anyway, but I'd gotten some info that made me feel like, yeah, we're getting Sedarian Morgan. That deal's just cut. And so I have not worried about it for 1 second in the last week or two. So
he actually committed at his official visit with the coaching staff, and of course kept it on the down low so he can make the big announcement today, July 2nd. But he committed to the staff on the Sunday of his official visit.
KLS 48 says, I never watched Locked On Bama after a loss. How bad did Luke rip us after the Vandy loss? Bad. I ripped us bad. And I also ripped his wardrobe bad, which also went viral and got me death threats. But that's okay.
It was the first time.
People don't like jokes. But anyway.
Yeah, Luke caught a virus. It was that bad. Luke caught a virus. It was that bad. I called it, and I mean this because, heck, they even used it on the documentary. I said after the Vanderbilt game that it was maybe the worst Alabama defensive performance of all time.
Yeah.
I said that on the show, partly because I meant it and partly because I was upset after the loss too. And then it got played on the Tide That Binds documentary that I said that. But I do say also, in addition to saying that, which I stand by, Alabama's defense as a whole last year, the 2024 defense was the best Alabama defense since 2017. That Vanderbilt game was just a glaring exception to what was otherwise a high-quality group.
Yeah, and going back to Morgan here for a second, I've seen this a lot, and actually this is on a text chain, or at least this theme was, which we're on with a bunch of other folks, Alabama fans, and we see a lot of Auburn people saying things like, hey, if Auburn can just win 7 or 8 games, we can flip a lot of these guys. I'm going to say again, and maybe this ends up on some Auburn podcast that, takes that didn't age well or whatever. I don't think that's true at all. And plus, what's the big magic number about winning 7 or 8 games? Why would him? If Sedarian Morgan is sold on Alabama right now, by the way, a team that, even though somebody pointed this out, the 9-4 record for Kalen DeBoer was like the best first-year record for an Alabama coach in God knows how long, right?
Forever.
I
I think he's the first-year coach to win 9 games at Alabama. Now, obviously, that comes with a lot of caveats, but
yeah, sure,
that is a thing. It is a thing.
So, so you could make the argument that, okay, but Kalen DeBoer didn't win 10 games, and we had won 10 games for 15, 16, 17 straight years. So you could say, oh, they're on a downward trend. And you could say, hey, look, Jalen Milroe regressed even. If I'm trying to be negative here for a second, giving a pitch to Sedarian as if I were Auburn or another school. And so why would you think that if he's going to overlook those things, why would you think that if you win 7 or 8 games, that it's going to be like, oh my God, look at this team. They are on the come up. 7 or 8 wins isn't going to do much for anybody. I just don't think so.
I also think, and this could be proven wrong. Speaking of old takes exposed, y'all go ahead and hit the record because this could prove wrong. But just an early take I have of this new world. Too many people, I was just discussing this on the same text chain Luke was talking about. Too many people are still living in the NIL world. Like this is NIL recruiting. That all ended with the House settlement. We're in a new landscape. Now, exactly what that new landscape is and exactly how it's going to play out, a lot of that is yet to be seen. We don't know for sure. We're just sort of guessing our way through. But one of my guesses here is I do think there will be less flips than there was. I think less flips total.
I agree.
This is why. It's because before these dudes commit, they know what their rev share total is. They know because now they can negotiate with the school, not the collective, not their agent talking to the NIL collective, but the agent and the kid talking to the school knows what the financial deal is, and it's set. It's hard to believe someone's going to swoop in with a lot more rev share. I mean, that just doesn't even make a lot of mathematical sense. I just think there's just and you can't really swoop in with some giant NIL deal. It has to pass through NIL Go before it can be authenticated as a legitimate NIL deal. I think that's going to mean less flips. So if this is Auburn's strategy, and by the way, it's not, that's just fans talk. That's Auburn fans wish casting. And hey, I'm guilty of that sometimes too. They want something to be true, so they predict it to be true. I think, nothing against Auburn, I think there will be less flips.
I agree.
New rev share world we're in.
Okay, I really want to go back to Sedarian here for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he's a 5-star on 2 services, 24/7 in Rivals. He's a 4-star, a very high 4-star on 3. He's the number 29 player in the country, which has got to be like right at the cutoff. And then on ESPN,
all 3 were 32 5-stars when the cycle ends. Yeah. So
he'll be one of them.
As of today, he really is a 5-star. They just don't award that 5th star because they don't want to take them away from kids, which is a great philosophy. They don't want to say today he's a 5-star and then end of the cycle he's not. They want to award permanent 5th star, so they kind of wait it out.
Gotcha. And that's coming from a guy that used to work for On 3, so he knows what he's talking about, folks. But ESPN bafflingly has him at number 47. Now, I want to tell you, I just said this on the radio, and that's why we were late getting to the show. Some people are like, yeah, Luke's drinking a pina colada and in the pool. Those things may have been happening too, but really what was keeping me late was I was on the radio. And so I had to cut that short. But I said, look, if there are 46 other guys.
You like pina coladas?
I love pina coladas.
Do you like getting caught in the rain?
Yes. Yes. There's something about the sand dunes.
Are you not into yoga, or are you into champagne?
Yeah, the dunes of the Cape. They're some of my favorite spots. But anyway, if there are 46 other dudes in the country better than Sedarian Morgan, it's the best recruiting crop there's ever been. I mean that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, you can't comp someone to Julio with a straight face and then say he's the 49th best player in the country. All these rankings, we're at the halfway point. All rankings are going to catch up and rearrange and update. There's a whole senior season to play. I went on a rant the other day that I think some people appreciated, got some texts about it, meaning that, the NFL, like Mel Kiper right now, he's got his board of what he thinks next April is going to look like. But you know what Mel wants to watch before he finalizes that? The entire season of football to be played this fall. He would kind of like to see that before he gets a little more adamant about what his board looks like. Recruiting is exactly the same. There's a whole season to play. So recruiting rankings are not finalized by any means. to say nothing of those postseason all-star games, which have a tremendous impact on rankings because all the highly rated players are together, performing together. It's easier to measure them side by side.
All right, I'm putting OG 20, or is it DG? I can't. My OG 22, who's apparently an Auburn fan. He says Bama wide receivers core won't come close to Auburn's. First of all, that's crazy talk. It doesn't mean Auburn's isn't good. Cam Coleman's really good. Eric Singleton's really good. Malcolm Simmons really good.
Receivers are fantastic. They're starting three. I said it on the show the other day. They're starting 3 receivers are basically as good as anybody's in the SEC. So that's true.
I totally agree.
Ever check your bank account and wonder where'd all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast.
We still don't have the official contract and official numbers and salary cap numbers of what the Jalen Ramsey trade with Johnny Smith and Mika's contract going out, what all that's going to do to the salary cap. I saw on Spot Rack it listed the Steelers as 11 million over. It doesn't really add up when I looked at the over the cap numbers. That's something I'm trying to still fully understand. Admittedly, contract and salary cap numbers are not how those work in trades and transactions. That's not my forte in understanding football. So we'll try to get some answer to that when we get a chance. But what I can talk about is why I think the Ramsey trade is more of a sign that the Watt signing is expected to happen, because I really think that there is a link between why the Steelers specifically wanted to get someone like Jalen Ramsey for this defense in this short term that is directly linked to them thinking that TJ Watt is definitely going to be around for the next 2, 3, maybe at most 4 more seasons. And it's because Jalen Ramsey, more so than Minkah Fitzpatrick, is going to be able to help against the very thing that has kind of slowed up the chance for TJ Watt to be a playmaker as well as the Steelers pass rush, and that's the quick release of the ball. Now, we talked about this more with Nick Farabaugh yesterday's episode, but I want to tie that into just think about what the Steelers have been trying to be in recent years. And they're a team that's won with defense, but primarily they've been winning with their pass rush. Their guys, TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Cam Hayward, they've been getting after the quarterback regularly, and TJ Watt has been a menace. But when teams neutralize TJ Watt, it's A, when they're clogging him up with multiple blockers, but also B, they're getting the ball out so quickly against the Steelers secondary. And there have been times when the Steelers secondary has been able to keep it to a minimum and force quarterbacks to hold on to the ball. But when you have cornerback play that you're not confident can win close to the line of scrimmage more consistently, you're going to have a situation where more of those guys are going to get open faster. And if they're getting open faster, that means the ball's coming out quicker. If the ball's coming out quicker, then the pass rush doesn't have as much time to develop. And then TJ Watt doesn't get to make some of those plays where he fights through a tight end and then a tackle and then gets to the quarterback or forces the quarterback to step up into the pocket, and Alex Highsmith comes from the other direction. But Jalen Ramsey does have a chance to impact that. Remember, Minkah Fitzpatrick would typically line up 10, 15, 20 yards off the line of scrimmage because he has to be the free safety, because he was the best last line of defense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And with that, he couldn't help regularly as much at the line of scrimmage against those quick passes. But now Jalen Ramsey is going to join a cornerback room with several guys who can be used to either using their physicality or their guile as an experienced cornerback in the NFL to disrupt receivers from getting open that quickly. Joey Porter Jr. is very good working in the press. And I think that people, they look at the raw numbers of the penalties that he's gotten in his career and they think, oh, he's just, he just gets called for penalties all the time everywhere. It's more so he gets called for penalties in bunches when he kind of starts to make mental errors, but a lot of those come towards the end of the route rather than at the start of a route. And I think that's more of a sign that if Joey Porter Jr. can shore up the things at the end of covering a route, which is what we've talked about with Gerald Alexander. I think the Steelers DB's coach, that's going to be one of his biggest tasks, is trying to get Joey Porter Jr. to just trust his work, not grabs onto somebody when the ball's in the air, because I think Joey Porter Jr. does a really good job throughout the rest of what he does in coverage.